Yes, we've been conducting a series of nationwide polls to find out more about some of your biggest consumer concerns. This week, we asked you about nuisance calls, and we found that nearly 1 in 20 people across the country have resorted to changing their phone number just to avoid them. More of those results later, but first, we asked Team Watchdog to help us investigate. We've recruited a team of Watchdog viewers from across the UK to test, interrogate,
I'm not overly impressed with that,
and investigate. I'm travelling the length and breadth of the country on a mission to get us all a better deal. This is Team Watchdog. Hello, team. Hi, Steph. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had my fill of nuisance calls. So this week, we want you to help us build a picture of just how bad this really is. Now, I know they're a nightmare, so I'm going to be showing you how to try and stop those pesky calls once and for all. Stand by your phones, guys. There's one thing our team definitely has in common. Nobody wants these calls.
they always have a knack of ringing at the wrong time, usually when you're just about to put the dinner on the table.
Right. I've tried speaking to them and say, can you remove my number off your databases? And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
They don't realise that they can make people's lives hell or a misery.
I don't want to change my number, but I receive a lot of nuisance calls. What do I do?
Well, Moshin, we'll get to that. But first, we want to see just how bad it really is. We've asked our team to record every nuisance call they've received over 2 weeks.
No, not today, thank you.
We've also installed call monitoring boxes in 5 team houses. These log exactly who is calling and when, so we can get a clear picture of where these calls are coming from.
No, I haven't been involved in an accident. No.
So when did cold calling become such a problem? Hello. Now, cold calling existed long before phones were invented. Peddlers travelled from town to town with their wares on their back. By the 20th century, well, you were more likely to see door-to-door salesmen flogging everything from encyclopedias to feather dusters. When the home got the phone, it became far cheaper for companies to bash those phone lines. All you needed was a handset and a phone book.
Yes, now I've got something to sell to you.
New technology has allowed companies to automate cold calls, and a whole industry has opened up selling on your personal details from company to company. All this has made it easier than ever for unwanted companies to bombard our phones. The latest stats show 86% of us in the UK receive them. But these calls aren't just annoying. The darker side of the industry means that scammers are preying on the most vulnerable people with so-called sucker lists, databases listing people who are seen as the easier targets. But the fight back has begun to help us all stop the phones ringing. As regulators have been given more powers, fines for companies that break the rules have risen to £2 million in the last year. But as the results from our team's task show, we're still a long way from banishing those calls yet. On average, each Team Watchdog family that took part received 6 calls across the fortnight, and it was a pretty even split across landlines and mobiles. It was the Leighton family in Derbyshire that received the most cold calls, a whopping 42 across the 2 weeks. Northern Ireland and the East Midlands saw the highest average number of calls per family. The lowest number were reported from families in Wales and the West Midlands. And interestingly, of the Team Watchdog families that have signed up to the telephone preference service, 2/3 told us they were still receiving nuisance calls. Big thanks to all the Team Watchdog families that took part in our first challenge. Coming up in a few minutes, I meet the Leighton family, armed with some tips to help them, and you, try and stop nuisance calls once and for all.
Please go away.
One of the things that does worry me is that they're trying to solicit information from Luke with these phone calls that he doesn't know whether he should be giving them or not.
So, Steph, it looks like the TPS isn't working that well.
And that's what we found from our nationwide poll. Have a look at this graph. It just shows you that 58% of people say that TPS doesn't work for them. So let me explain a bit more about it. Now, every company making marketing calls has to check the numbers they're calling to make sure they're not on the TPS list. And that can take up to 28 days to fully kick in. Now, Ofcom estimates that after this time, the volume of calls you're getting will drop by at least a third, so it's still worth being on the list. Now, if you are still getting calls, it could be because you've ticked a box on a company website which overrides the TPS, or they could be rogue businesses.
So what does the poll reveal about the sort of things that people are trying to avoid nuisance calls?
Yeah. People don't want these nuisance calls, so there's lots of ways people have been trying to avoid them. So you can see here the majority of people say they don't answer calls from unknown numbers. Some people will block a specific number from calling them, but only 12% have actually installed call blockers. And that's interesting because of that 12%, well, 83% of them are saying that call blockers have actually worked. It's been the most effective solution for them.
Steph, thank you. Well, let's find out now what Steph suggested for the Leighton family and, more importantly, if it works.
I've come to Derbyshire to visit the Leighton family, including Dad John and his 24-year-old son Luke. In our 2-week test, they told us they got 42 unwanted calls. John, just explain to me what it's like in terms of the nuisance calls you get.
You get them constantly, 2-3 times a day, both to the house phone and to the mobile. Companies phoning us pretending to be our electricity and gas suppliers, trying to get details from us about our account.
It's clearly doing your head in.
Doing my head in. And for people with learning disabilities and special needs like I've got, I just find it stressful. I mean, it impacts on my daily life and it impacts on my mental state as well.
Is it a worry for you, John?
One of the things that does worry me is that they're trying to solicit information from Luke with these phone calls that he doesn't know whether he should be giving them or not, and that is a worry.
You can see that it's clearly impacting your life, these cold calls. So we've got some tips for you to try and help you. So you up for trying them?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Come on then. But before I even got a chance to show Luke and John our tips, filming was interrupted by another unwanted call.
No, 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 thank you. Please go away.
Who was that, Luke?
Claimed advice.
Just in the short time that I've spent with the family, I've seen firsthand the impact that these nuisance calls are having on them. Like, Luke was so stressed out there when they rang him, and even after the phone was put down, he just got really tense and upset inside, and you can just see this family are having a nightmare with these nuisance calls.
So let's see if our top tips can help. Oh, so this is your landline. This is a snazzy one. It looks like a sculpture, doesn't it? So the first tip is to go on the telephone preference service list, and it's really simple to do, and you can add your mobile numbers to that as well. You just need to text TPS and your email address to 85095. Tip 2, get reporting. If you're already on the list and still getting calls, report it to the Information Commissioner's Office. They have the power to fine misbehaving companies and stop them making these calls. Tip 3, get blocking. So, another phone here, and I've got another tip for you, and this is to use a call blocker. So you can buy one of these boxes or a phone that does this, which will basically block unwanted calls. But be careful, because scammers use cold calling to try and sell useless versions of these boxes. So do some research and only buy from reputable companies that you've contacted yourself. So we're going to leave you with these for a few weeks and see how you get on.
Well, we'll give it a go. Hope it does.
I'll leave the Leightons to it, and a few weeks later, they send me a message with some fantastic news.
The system you put us in works perfectly. No nuisance calls at all.
It's helped a lot because it's brought down the stress levels, and I'm a lot less stressed now.
Get in, a cracking result.